Hello, beautiful moms and entrepreneurs. My name is Charisse Walker, and I'm your host of the Unbreakable Mompreneurs podcast. This is a place where we come together to learn, grow, and inspire. So sit back, relax, and let's get started. I have a question for you. Do you suffer from sometimes imposter syndrome, or do you feel like you don't always believe everything that you see, and you struggle with your self-esteem and you have negative self-talk? Well, words really do matter. And so today I have Aurora Winter, and she's going to talk about that with her book, Turn Words into Wealth. And so Aurora, without further ado, will you please introduce yourself to our audience?
It's great to be on the show with you, Charisse. So I'm Aurora Winter. I have an MBA. I'm a serial entrepreneur. I've launched several businesses that generated 7 figures. I'm an award-winning TV writer, producer, and I love helping people to turn their words into wealth. And you're going to get some tips today by listening to Charisse's podcast that you can implement right away to start turning your words into wealth.
Okay, so we were talking for a while before the show, and I just have to say, listeners, she is a wealth of knowledge and gives away freely. Like what she's done for me in just about 5 minutes worth of time, somebody has not been able to do for me in over 3 years. So amazing stuff. So listen up, okay? And then she might have something special at the end if you listen all the way to the end as well. So let's talk about that, Aurora. Why do words matter?
Gosh, words do matter, but I want to just acknowledge, thank you so much for saying that, because although words matter, and I'll give some tips about how to create the right words, intention matters even more. So my intention is to be a contribution. Mm-hmm. You know, every morning I listen to actually Sarah McLachlan sing the prayer of St. Francis of Assisi. And that sets my day on how can I be of service? How can I be a contribution? So while we're going to dive into words, your intention also matters and your mindset matters. And if you have the intention of being of service, don't be surprised if that attracts wealth. If you have different intentions, you may repel wealth. So I just wanted to say that your intention matters. In fact, sometimes if you go to various places that teach you how to speak, such as Toastmasters, and they double down on stop umming and erring and walk in a V and look at the audience a certain way, that's fine. But what matters even more is your intention. And if you show up with an intention of being of service, I promise you, it'll go 10 times better. So why words matter is they are the way that we communicate, but most people, especially well-educated people, make the terrible mistake of thinking that the message sent is the message received. And that couldn't be farther from the truth. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so there's actually 3 steps to the neuroscience of communication. And typically people who've gone to university, like you and I have, we are taught to do the 3rd step first. And our brains just don't work that way. So our brains evolved over millennia in order to help the species survive. And you cannot pay attention to everything. There are too many bits of data flooding in. So the very first step in communicating, so that the message sent is the message received, is hook attention. Mm-hmm. What are we talking about, and why should I listen to you? Is the basic first step. So an example would be the title of my book, Turn Words into Wealth, or the subject line on an email, right? It's like, why should I open this email? Why should I listen to this podcast? I would listen to this podcast to find out a little bit more about turning words into wealth. That is the first step. And that is appealing to the ancient croc brain, the reptilian brain, which is always looking for, is this dangerous? Is this something good? Is this something to eat? So we want to communicate. It's a little morsel of some tasty goodness coming up. It's all right to trigger fear a little bit, but not so much that the person shuts down. So people do pay attention 5 times more to things that are alarming, such as the stock market. So you can attract the croc brain with either a little bit of morsel of something goodness or a little bit of watch out, pay attention to this, but don't overflood. The second step, and it does need to be done in this order, and it takes longer to explain it than to do it. The second step is social proof. So human beings survived as a community, as a tribe. And so we really care. Our next filter is who else thinks this is okay? Who else is interested in this? So, for example, me being on your podcast is social proof that I think you're worth talking to, and vice versa, right? So, it's social proof. This book, Turn Words into Wealth, was the outstanding nonfiction book of the year in its category publishing when it came out. So that's social proof. Okay, so now we've done the first two steps, gotten attention, given a little bit of social proof. Now you can start to talk from the cerebral cortex, and you can give maybe up to 5 minutes of content before you need to allow the other person a moment to reflect or respond or react, because you want to have a conversation, not a monologue. People usually don't like listening to monologues except from stand-up comedians on Netflix. So in university, we are basically taught to send the verbal equivalent of an Excel spreadsheet.
Mm-hmm.
But how you will never forget this tip is if you get an Excel spreadsheet or any kind of attachment from an unknown sender with no subject line, what is the probability that you're going to open it? Hopefully zero, because it could contain a virus. And it's the same thing with ideas. Ideas are viruses. We need to be careful what ideas we pay attention to, even if it's our own negative self-talk. Beware who you listen to, even if it's yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's this very smart filtering mechanism. First, address the crock brain with a hook of what is the subject and why should they pay attention? Second, address who else thinks this is worthwhile. For example, my first book was endorsed by Dr. Wayne Dyer. So a little bit of, you're, I'm sure, a leading real estate agent, and you've helped many people. So a little bit of other people you've helped, and then a little bit of content.
Wow. And that all makes sense. Because I have somebody that tells me they do. They say the hook, the story, and then the offer after that. And so the offer could be, why should I keep listening to you? It doesn't have to be you're pitching or selling something, but it's true. You have to grab attention and then make sure that you go from there. So that's great advice. I love that.
And the best way for the third step, as you said, is not the offer, at least not right away, but
Mm-hmm.
is a story. I think stories are the most effective and most powerful way of selling, and how you can sell through stories, no matter what you're selling, whether you're selling, do you want to list your house with me, or whether you're selling, would you like to have coaching to help you through this problem? You want to share stories with a beginning, middle, and an end about how you've helped other people through this problem. So stories about problems, the cost or consequence of the problem, and you or your company being the bridge between the problem and the solution, are really great and dramatic stories. And it doesn't even have to be a pitch. And people are like, oh, I see. That's the kind of problems that people solve. So an example would be one of the authors that I'm working with, Michael Stockham. He is a litigation attorney. And before he met me, his problem was he had a burning desire in his heart to be an author. And he had zero time, to write books. And he wasn't really sure how to write a book because he'd never actually done that. But by working together, now we've got two best-selling legal thrillers. He's got over 3,000 reviews on Amazon. He's sold 100,000 books. And because he's got my support, he's able to still thrive as a litigation attorney and pull down the big bucks while we are brainstorming a total of 10 books to launch his next John Grisham-esque career. So that's really fun for me to be a contribution in that way, and has enabled him to take the little time that he does have available and use it wisely to get his books written.
Okay, I don't know why, but that just leaped out of me of excitement because it's so true. Like I said, you are an amazing person, and to be able to use your expertise and your wealth of knowledge, because I can't tell you how many people when they're like, oh, you wrote a book? I've thought about writing a book. I don't think people understand how much time it takes and what to do. And yeah, it's easy to sit down, write a book and manuscript, and then it's like, I have a self-publishing company, but now what? Right? I don't
Yeah.
know how to do any of that stuff. And so, like, embarrassing, but it will change after today. But reviews are an important thing to get. And I'm like, oh yeah, that's a good point. I should probably do that because I spent 2 years writing this book. I should probably actually have people read it and support it, because they've ordered it, they've read it, they tell me, but they haven't gotten and reviewed it. And so the ask sometimes is what people don't always think about. And so hiring someone like you're like, look, this is my expertise. This is what I can do. Let me help you. And so often we don't know what to do. And so why are we so hesitant to not ask for help?
Well, how can you know what to do? The first
Yeah.
time we do anything, we make all the rookie mistakes, right? So if it really matters, it's worth working with somebody who's got expertise in that area, who's already made all those rookie mistakes, and now has figured out how to do it the right way, and it can help you do it the right way. That's why I wrote the book, Turn Words into Wealth, because it actually made my heart hurt how many people would spend, on average, the first time authors spend 3.5 years writing a book, which is a long amount of time.
Yeah.
And then they they didn't know what they didn't know, so they would drop the ball right at the finish line. They wouldn't test the title, they wouldn't test the subtitle, they wouldn't test the cover image.
Mm-hmm.
There'd be no call to action to come to their website. There'd be no salting of stories in the book about what kind of problems they solve, or if they're available as a coach, consultant, speaker, whatever else they do. And so a book that was 95% done, but just with a little love, that extra 5% would have turned it into a money-making machine through no fault. I mean, we all miss the things the first time we do something. We all make the rookie mistakes. So I love to help people turn their books into what they hoped they could become. And part of that, as we were talking about before we started recording, is I really insist would be too strong of a word because I'm always of service. But I adamantly persuade that it's very important to have a minimum of 3 months, hopefully 6, but at least 3 months before publication, where you apply for awards, you get book reviews, you get beta readers, you appear on podcasts, you start the whole engine before the book is published. And one of the things I love to do as I'm creating books with my clients, I usually create them by interviewing them. So we will have maybe 10 hours of video content that's used to create the book. This is the way books have been created, except for the video component, usually transcribed. Like Winston Churchill didn't write so many books by longhand himself. He had secretaries, he had editors, he had assistants. He would speak his books, and then they would be turned into the written word. But what I love to do is thinking it through. Why not chop up that 10 hours of video that we use to create the first draft of the book and make hundreds of pieces, maybe thousands of pieces of social media content, so that even before the book comes out, the author has an arsenal of social media content to create buzz. I mean, even a 30-second clip can be valuable promoting what the book is about, or the title, or a little snippet of the content.
That's such good advice. And why didn't I interview you like a year ago, right? Yep, screwed that one up. And that's why, like, you're an expert in that field. And so, and that's the other thing is I do have a coach, and yet that coach didn't coach me the right way. And so we launched and we weren't ready. And so we should have waited. It shouldn't have been pushed so quickly. So I think that that's something that's really important. Something else you talked about that, again, you gave me so much information, but like ChatGPT in the world of AI, how should we use AI to help us with our books and titles and different things?
Okay, this is a really great question, but I want to circle back. And the should have, could have, would have. We
Yeah.
are where we are in
Right.
life, and
Right.
there's always things that, oh, I could have done that differently. But what can we do now? It's never too late. People listening to this may have had a book that only has one review, or that
That would be me.
that they didn't achieve the launch they wanted. Well, let's do it now.
Yeah.
Let's do it now. It's fine. Whatever. It's
Yeah.
not over till the fat lady sings. Okay, so what was the question? AI. Okay, so I'm super stoked about AI. I have 2 key points. One, double down on being human. Double down on being human. There is no shortage of information or words. And you can produce words very quickly, but what is a shortage of is humanity. This means that your stories, your challenges, the adversity that you faced, your struggles that you faced as you tried to overcome big problems, and your final I managed to solve it. This is the currency of the future because we are hungry for human connection. We are hungry for stories that resonate with our own challenges and our own hero's journey. This is why the movie business is a like multi-billion dollar business because it's the hero's journey again and again.
Yeah.
So double down on being human. You want to get clear. What are your stories? What do you stand for?
Mhm.
What kind of change are you trying to contribute or create in the world? What is your vision? What is your leadership? If you were launching a movement, what is that movement about? And what are your stories or other stories that you can collect that support that? And then once you're clear on all those very human answers, your personal stories, the things that you care about, the difference you want to make, then you could work with a coach like myself. I interview people, turn that into videos, audios, and first draft manuscript. But then we can use the AI to help more quickly polish that manuscript or research, find other stories like these couple of stories,
Mhm.
or give me data that backs up this. I'm working with another client. Her book's called The Vitality Solution. So, one of her chapters is about fasting. So we've got a whole hour-long interview about fasting, which is fascinating. But we can use ChatGPT or other AI to give me data, find resources to back up this claim that after 13 hours of fasting, your body has gone into ketosis, whatever. So we can use it that way. So that's super exciting because the onerous part, some of the onerous time-consuming parts that are not joyful and are not really your core message, but need to be done, like find the research, find another story, tidy up this English. Is there anything unclear about this? Can be handled, or at least it's like delegating. You still need to have the expert touch it at the end. But also, like I use Notebook LM. So, for example, I've written a fantasy series. Oh, we didn't even need to talk about this.
Yeah.
Um, a fantasy series for young adults, which we could come back and talk about another time,
Yeah.
called Magic, Mystery, and the Multiverse. And so far, there's 3 books in the series, or for my client who's writing 9 more legal thrillers. It's a lot of words. You can feed an entire book or even a couple of books into a program called Notebook LM, and then you can ask it to do really useful things like give me a list of all of the characters and some detail about them. So that can be really useful because if you get, I don't know, hundreds of characters, some of them might be minor, but you might want to have the same character appear in book 2 and book 5 and book 7.
Oh,
But
cool.
then you're like, as a human being, you're like, was the last name Miller or was it Mills or what,
Mhm.
and the AI can help break the back on that task and do stuff like that quickly. But again, we need to be aware AI makes mistakes.
Yeah.
It is super fast.
Mhm.
It responds to expert prompts much better than amateur prompts. And
Mhm.
you do need to have the human expert review it, or else it'll go down to
Mhm.
the lowest common denominator, which is mediocrity at best.
Well, and also ChatGPT, they make up research as well sometimes.
They do.
So, like if you're quoting an article, like it tells you, hey, in this article, da 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 da, like go and fact check that because it might not exist. They might have just made it up as an example. So that
Right.
type of stuff you have to be careful of as well. I've,
Exactly right.
yeah, I can't remember why I learned that or something, but yeah, I went to fact check and they're like, oh no, it was just an example. And I'm like, oh, good to know.
I think Perplexity may not have that same issue, but I haven't double checked that. That's just caught my attention. So
Mm.
different AI platforms have different skills and different shortcomings, but it's like having a super eager, really fast intern who's
Mhm.
20. No life experience and can
Not learned.
eagerly make a mistake.
I'm so happy to please and emotionless.
And emotionless, right? The better your prompts, the better the answers. So
Mhm.
I'm an award-winning screenwriter, I'm an award-winning author. I've launched multiple businesses. So I bring a unique set of talents, storytelling, entrepreneurship, and even can this be adapted for film and television? Because that can be a big money play too. So I know what I'm looking for, so I can give pretty good prompts to get what I want. So pay attention to the prompting. That really matters.
Yeah, that's really good advice. So what is something new that you've learned that may have surprised or delighted you in some way recently?
Hmm. Okay. Well, seeing as you got me thinking about AI, so what delighted me in Notebook LM,
Mhm.
I've uploaded, you can upload an entire book and
Mhm.
then you can press on studio and you'll have a male voice and a female voice talk about that book for about half an hour as
Wow.
if it was a podcast interview reviewing the book that they've read. That blew my mind.
Oh
So
my
for my
God.
clients, part of what I have my AV audiovisual team do is we create between 30-second to 1 hour video and audio clips. So I have somebody on my team, my son actually, Yale Winter, who's very good with runway and other visual media, but we can take the snippets of content, whether it's the author talking on a podcast with somebody like yourself, or it's me interviewing the author, or Notebook LM
Mhm.
talking about the book, and then we can add images and just create a plethora of content. That was really quite fun for the legal thriller. Jake Fox just came out. Jake Fox Ties That Blind, but you do have to be careful. Don't upload the whole book because it'll freely give the spoilers. You
That's
can upload the whole book if it's a nonfiction book. So
right.
this is where you have to have the human touch. You got to go, okay, we don't want to give away the spoilers when we're enticing people to read a fiction book.
See, you know, all these things, it's so good to know. Okay, so I have a question for you because you've started and you've sold companies and you've done so many different things. So I want you to think back to you just starting out, a new business owner. What is one piece of advice that you wish you would have known then that you know now?
Hard to get it down to one piece. I think I stumbled into this gradually, and I wish that I had known it more explicitly right from the get-go, is be relentless in your pursuit of solving the problems your ideal client has.
Hmm.
So never stop solving problems because you may already have a great value proposition and people are buying from you, but can you solve more problems? Can you solve them faster? Can you solve them better? And are there out of the box ways to solve them? So, for example, I've used grants, I've used tax shelters to make, okay, here's the offer. The investment is still the same, but you're going to get half of that back from a grant or a tax shelter. Well, that changes the impact on the client. And my competitors never seem to think that way. Or for example, now, like my business is helping people with their books. But as I notice the problems that they come up with, I've noticed, oh, the next step is they need to market the book, they need to advertise the book, they need to get book awards, they need to have like a pre-launch schedule, they need to get on podcasts, they need to be media trained, they need to have turn their book into a hook for radio, TV, and podcast. Oh, and then they need to become a speaker, and then they need to do a TED Talk. So I am always noticing where my clients stop and where they have a problem. And once I figure out how to solve that problem for myself, then I can offer to solve it for others. I think that is the key to being a successful entrepreneur. As
Hmm.
entrepreneurs, we solve problems at a profit because otherwise it's a hobby
Hmm.
or you're just hemorrhaging cash. That means that a problem is actually a gift. Every time you notice a problem, you're like, oh, there's a problem. Can I solve it?
Hmm.
Can I solve it faster, cheaper, better? Oh yeah, like I've helped people launch numerous books, so I've gotten pretty good at solving it faster, cheaper, better, in a more fun way.
Hmm. And I think that we don't talk about that because that, as an entrepreneur, you're solving a problem. And sometimes, like I always hear serve not sell, serve not sell. And so I have tended to go above and beyond, way above and beyond, and sometimes talk myself out of jobs because it's in the best interest of my client. And I don't have issues with that. But the times that I probably could improve are, you know what? This does have to stop being a hobby because I'm so wanting to help everyone and I have a hard time charging people for that. And it's like, wait a second, how do you support your family then? You can't. And so making those offers, doing what you're supposed to be doing, and that's something I've really been hyper focused on, especially the last year and a half, is the value. You have to believe that you have
Yeah.
value and that your time is valuable. And So even though you want to help people, there still has to be something else. Because I remember this one guy, known him for a long time, and he calls me up. And this is after I've spent hundreds of thousands of dollars in coaching, right? And he's like, okay, sure, I want to take you and your husband out to dinner with me and my wife. And I want you during that dinner to teach me everything you know about blah. So, well, it's been 3 years of knowledge and a lot of money. A dinner is not going to quite cut it, you know?
Yeah,
And so if they don't
exactly.
value you for what your knowledge, I mean, if you want to learn that and you want to spend that kind of money, great, go do it. If not, you can hire me and I'm happy to condense it and make it much easier for you. But that has value. And if you don't see that, then I'm going to move on to the person that does. And not in a rude way, but
Not in a rude way, yeah. Well,
yeah.
my tip on that is that the filtering needs to come at the very beginning. So he's not an ideal prospect for you, right? Obviously, he wants you to condense whatever $300,000 of investment and time into like a dinner, and he thinks like paying for dinner is going to cover that. Okay, so that's what I do. Like I only work with experts and entrepreneurs
Mhm.
because I want to feel good that what I'm doing is creating at least a 10 times return on their investment.
Right.
So if people don't have a business or don't have a back end or have a poetry book, I am all a big fan of write, whatever you want to write. But for the people who want to work with me at Same Page Publishing, I need them to have expertise
Mhm.
or be an entrepreneur. Because if, my client who is a litigation attorney, like we're getting him on podcast now, because any one client is probably worth 7 figures to him.
Right.
So to position him as an author slash rainmaker slash
Mhm.
the next John Grisham, if he's on podcast and just gets one new client, that's $1 million, right? Okay, so that is an interesting return on investment. Or, I've worked with people who have other kinds of expertise. I've helped people raise capital. Everybody I've helped hone their pitch to raise capital has raised at least 7 figures, some 8 or 9 figures. So
Oh.
there's a return on investment. That if you're
Mhm.
writing a poetry book, that's really hard for me to create a 10 times return on investment. So, but for all of us as entrepreneurs solve problems at a profit, which means you don't have to have a nervous breakdown or lose all of your ability to serve your family and put food on the table. But the filtering needs to come to, okay, what problems can you solve? And what who are the people or the category of people most in pain from that problem not being solved? And who is it worth the most to for you to solve that problem?
That's such good advice.
It's pretty simple. And then with all kindness in your heart, you can take on some friends or some pro bono uh, volunteer work, but just be clear, this person is a gift. This is business.
Right. And don't get me wrong, listeners, because I'm queen of botch delivery. So when you talk about words and words matter, they do. And I never intended to ever come out a different way than, I mean, nice, right? That's just not who I am. But I think that, yeah, I'm more than happy to be able to do anything I can to help somebody. But um, there also can't be a take advantage of. And that's where I think sometimes, and it depends and it varies for everything, but you have to make that determination and figure out where your line is. But you need to have a line.
And also, curiously, it may not be a gift to the other person
Yeah.
because there's nothing worth less than free advice.
Hmm.
Right. So if somebody's not willing to invest in themselves and their business and their career and invest in coaching with you,
Hmm.
then even if you tried to download everything you learned over that dinner, how well would that person be able to absorb it while they're drinking wine and they don't have their notebook and they don't really have their learner
Hmm.
brain on?
Yeah. No, that's very, very true. Okay,
Yeah,
last question, because we are going to transfer to being a mom, because you mentioned you have a son.
I
And so
do.
I want you to imagine yourself sitting on a park bench, enjoying the sun. Imagine the sun beaming down, and you're just watching nature. And this 9-month pregnant woman comes and sits next to you. And you start having a conversation with her, and you flash back to all of your time with your children. And so, what is something that you would give as advice, and not necessarily as a new mom, but advice to that person?
I would open a conversation with her and see if there was something troubling her heart, and I would listen. I think the
Wow.
biggest gift we can give another person is deeply listening.
That is unique. I've not had that response at all. I love that. Because how often do we talk instead of listen? A good example,
Yeah.
and this has always stood out to me, and I've really worked hard the last couple of years. Brian Buffini, he's a coach that I adore. He's class act in real estate, and he was my very first coach that I've ever had. And this man is just amazing. He has 6 kids as well, and he came home because it's important for him to be able to be home with his children and to attend their events. And so he came home very, very exhausted, and his wife had some friends over. And so they start talking to him and stuff, and he just keeps asking them. He keeps asking them as much stuff that he could have loved to talk about. He didn't. He just asked some questions and things, and he goes, "Well, I'm tired. I'm going to get up and go to bed." And they're like to his wife, "He is such an amazing man. He walks on water." Like they just think he's such a great guy. And why is that? Because when you can get people to talk about themselves instead of you talk about yourself, it really is a huge difference. And people are like, "Oh, I love that guy." And why? Because we want to be able to talk about our thoughts and our feelings. And sometimes people are just waiting to be asked. And very few
Yeah,
times are they.
you're absolutely right. The other thing that happens is when somebody is deeply listening
Mhm.
and the other person is doing their best to think through what exactly do they want to say,
Yeah.
there's an alchemy that happens. So that's why I interview people to create their books, because there's something quite intimidating about facing the blank page and you're trying to type and people just freeze. But if you're talking about something that you care about or
Mhm.
you're passionate about to somebody who's actively listening, you will go deeper. You'll discover beautiful things that you didn't even know that you wanted to say. You'll discover the gold in your
Mhm.
own story. Like there's really something um, alchemical
Yeah.
that happens when somebody's really trying to think about what's the honest truth here, and somebody else is deeply listening.
When I go back and I edit my podcast, I'm like, I'm the one interviewing. But for some reason, the time that I hear it the second time, I'm like, wow, I totally missed that. And sometimes it's because, like, what am I going to ask you next or what?
Yeah.
And so it's hard for me to give up that editing part to somebody else because I like listening to it. Yeah.
The other thing that's cool is if you can talk through your book
Mhm.
with myself or with somebody else who's actively listening, you can do it by yourself, but then you don't have the alchemistry of the listener. Um, Most people can talk about 8,000 words in an hour.
Mhm.
Most first-time authors cannot write 8,000 words in a week.
Yeah.
So a typical book is maybe 40 or 50,000 words. So with my clients, we probably record 80,000 words and then we can chop it down to 50. But it's easy and it's fun because they're like, I didn't even know that I thought that, or I didn't even remember that story until you asked me that question. And so it's fun and it's engaging. And people are also, they're also healing through the process because an unexamined life is not worth living. But basically, an unexamined life has got this all kinds of dross
Mhm.
hidden with the gold and the diamonds. And as I ask people questions, or you ask people questions, they look at it and they examine it, and it's a chance to pick out the diamonds and the gold and the platinum and let go of the mud.
Wow.
And it can actually transform your identity when you do that.
I love that. And now, like Riverside, you get the transcript. So just go talk to yourself, and then you have the transcript and you can upload that. So that's good. Well,
Yeah.
if our listeners wanted to find you, because I absolutely am going to, but how do they do that?
So my publishing company is called Same Page Publishing. So they can go to samepagepublishing.com and they can see various different people I've helped with their books and the awards that they've won. If they'd like to get the book, Turn Words into Wealth, Blueprint for Your Business, Brand, and Book, it's wherever books are sold. But you can also get the ebook for free if you'd like at turnwordsintowealth.com. And then you'll also get the bonus of 5 videos that will give you some more information about how you can attract capital clients and media coverage through the power of words. And then after you've read the book and explore it a little bit more. If you are an expert or an entrepreneur and you would like to have my help creating your book and building your business and your brand, then you can sign up for a free breakthrough business call at bookcall.biz.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that.
You're welcome.
And thank you for being on the show.
My pleasure.
Unbreakable Mompreneurs, I hope that if you're thinking about writing a book, it's not that overwhelming. And the big step is to get started, but I highly recommend, like I said, she's amazing. I'm excited to be able to work with her after this and getting your book out there, because take it from me, you can publish it, but now you got to sell it. And it would have been nice to be able to have more reviews and have a build up like that. I wish I would have known that before. So go out and make it a great day, and I wish you all the best. Beautiful moms, remember, you are unbreakable. Keep illuminating the world with your strength, pursuing your dreams, and reveling in the splendor of motherhood. This is Charisse Walker, bidding you farewell for now. Stay tuned for more empowering conversations on the next episode of the Unbreakable Mompreneurs podcast. Until then, keep shining bright. Signing off with love, Charisse Walker.